Hello and welcome back to J.P.'s World of Wrestling. I am your man J.P. Oh, and today I'm going to talk about WWF in 1995. Now, why am I talking about that? Well, I started watching 1995 WWF, and the reason why I did that is because I was listening to Ted DiBiase's podcast, the Everybody's Got a Pod. And they were talking about In Your House. Now, for those of you who don't know, those of you who stopped watching wrestling after like 1989, in 1995, they started having a pay-per-view every month. And it was called In Your House. Now, the first couple were, they were pretty good. The first one, they actually gave away a house. But then after that, it's just kind of a way to make some money and not have to charge like $40 for a pay-per-view. I remember this was 1995, so back then $40 was like a lot of money. So, and then Ted DiBiase in his podcast mentioned that when they started having a pay-per-view every month, it kind of diminished the storylines a little bit. A lot of the times, they didn't really have time to really build up the story for all the matches on the pay-per-view. And after watching a lot of these, lo and behold, the veteran was right. At this point in 1995, I'm sort of right after the third or fourth In Your House pay-per-view, and it's kind of right before Survivor Series. And the last couple of In Your Houses that they did in 1995 that I watched, they did kind of feel kind of thrown together. Like, such and such date is In Your House. And then on the very week before on Raw, they'd say, oh yeah, by the way, the Smoking Guns are going to take on Razor Ramon and the 1-2-3 Kid. I'm like, but they're not even feuding. What in the world, but... So yeah, it did feel like they were kind of thrown together. And, from watching WWF in 1995, I can kind of see why business was slow in 1995. Because, Hulk Hogan had left the company. Bret Hart was they were trying to push Bret Hart as kind of the top guy, but yet Big Daddy Cool Diesel's the champion. And here's the thing, I never had an issue with Diesel, but he wasn't exactly an established star. He's not like this, he wasn't like this huge name. And that's, I think, was the problem with the WWF during that time period. There were no huge stars. There was just lack of really huge stars. I mean, there was a lot of solid talent, but it was also like really heavily gimmicked. Now, I know the WWF, they kind of had gimmicks for a long time, starting with the late 80s. But in 1995, it seemed like over the top. It seemed like every other wrestler was some sort of cheesy, over the top, occupational gimmick. And I'm going to show you what I mean. I typed some of these out, and I'm going to read them off to you. These are all the gimmicks that the WWF had in 1995. A lot of these are occupational gimmicks. Now, I'm not saying that all of these gimmicks are bad. Some of them actually worked, but these are like most of these are occupational gimmicks. Just listen to this. Okay, they had an evil dentist, a circus clown, a pirate, a hog farmer, an evil school teacher, a garbage man, a fitness instructor, a tax collector, street rappers, like a tag team of street rappers, rodeo cowboys, a tag team. Then they had a psychopathic lunatic, a heavy metal guitarist, a king, a race car driver, a ninja, a sumo wrestler, a Native American, a mortician, an intellectual presidential candidate, a truck driver, a country singer, a roadie, and a bulldog. Now, like I said, some of those gimmicks worked, and some of those gimmicks had actually been around for a while. And when I said mortician, of course, I was referring to The Undertaker. And The Undertaker, obviously, that gimmick worked. And it's one of the greatest gimmicks ever. And sumo wrestler, of course, referred to Yokozuna. Obviously, that gimmick worked. And Native American, that was Tatanka. That gimmick worked. And I forgot to mention, they also had a cocaine dealer. Now, that refers to Razor Ramon. Now, Razor Ramon, that gimmick worked, but they never actually said, oh, he's a cocaine dealer. But the character Razor Ramon derived from the character from Scarface. The main character from Scarface, who was, in fact, a cocaine dealer. So, I mean, that's a lot of gimmicks. That's a lot of, like, occupational gimmicks. And when the WWF would bring in a new guy during that time period, Vince McMahon would ask him, so what do you do on the side? And they would tell him, oh, well, I'm a tennis instructor. Okay, we'll make you a tennis instructor. Or, well, I'm a licensed plumber. Okay, now we've got a plumber character. I just remember in the 80s, everybody was just a wrestler. Guys were just wrestlers with the occasional gimmick, but mostly it was just wrestling. Everybody was wrestlers. And after a while, WCW, a lot of time, for years, they had just wrestling. But, they started to get kind of gimmicked, and they started to get gimmicky and everything. But in the mid-90s, it's just, business was slow. Because the WWF just didn't have any star power. They had Bret. Well, I mean, yeah, okay, so they had Yokozuna, but in 1995, Yokozuna was kind of getting, like, bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was really unhealthy, and it was starting to really slow. He was starting to really slow down in the ring. So Bret couldn't really have good matches with him. And then there was The Undertaker, which, yeah, sure, Bret could have good matches with The Undertaker, but if you have Undertaker win the title, eventually you got to get it off of him. And then, Diesel was the champion for most of 1995. And like I said, I don't have a problem with Diesel per se, but he wasn't exactly this huge star, this over-the-top character, and he wasn't, like, established. He had just come into the company the year before, and then already he's the champion. Now, they had Sid, like Psycho Sid, Sid Justice, Sid Vicious, whatever you want to call him, and he was pretty good. And actually, the next year, I think he won the championship at least a couple times, and that was okay. That was fine. He was an established star, and he was over. People actually liked him. But in 1995, they put him with the $1 Million Corporation. And I think that kind of held him back. That's kind of when, they had guys like Tatanka and IRS and Kama and King Kong Bundy. All those guys were in the $1 Million Corporation. And they were all heels. And then eventually the 1-2-3 Kid turned heel and joined the $1 Million Corporation. But then after, I think, 1996, or sometime in 1996, the $1 Million Corporation was kind of no more. And I think the WWF tried to kind of move away from, like, overly gimmicked characters. But in 1995, it was just, whew, man. Right now, I'm determined to get all the way through 1995. Now, I started with the Royal Rumble. Then I watched all the Monday Night Raws leading up to the first In Your House. And then I watched all the Monday Night Raws leading up to WrestleMania 11. And so on and so forth, etc., etc. Now, I still got a little bit more to go of 1995. But yeah, a lot of the In Your House pay-per-views felt just kind of thrown together at the last minute. At some point in 1995, they stopped doing the In Your House reports with Todd Pettengill for whatever reason. by, I think, the third or fourth one, they just stopped doing the In Your House report with Todd Pettengill. Now, call your local cable company. No, at this point, in 95, they just, oh, join us next week. We're with For In Your House on Sunday. It's like, whoa, already? Jeez, there's. But yeah, they just kind of threw them pay-per-views together, and I don't know. But yeah, looking back on this year, I can kind of see why business is slow, because Bret Hart didn't really have, a lot of big name stars to work with. He had Shawn Michaels, but he wasn't really working with Shawn Michaels at that point. He wasn't really feuding with Diesel. He was feuding with Jerry Lawler, basically, in 1995. And through that, he had a couple matches with Jerry Lawler, but then Jerry Lawler sicked his evil dentist, Isaac Yankem, on him. So Bret had to wrestle Isaac Yankem in a feud. And then Bret had to wrestle a pirate, like an evil pirate. I don't know. I felt bad for Bret, because that's probably the reason why Bret was the second lowest drawing champion in history, because he didn't have any real strong opponents to work with. I mean, he can't just have, match after match after match with Razor Ramon, and, Jeff Jarrett was there, and he had a run as the Intercontinental Champion, but I thought Jeff Jarrett was kind of overrated. I didn't really like Jeff Jarrett. The Roadie kind of came into his own after Jeff Jarrett left, but yeah, I didn't really like Jeff Jarrett, even though he was a heel and you're not supposed to like him. But even as a heel, I don't know, I didn't like it. There was something about him. I didn't care. I didn't get anything about his character, but anyway, I think after Jeff Jarrett lost the Intercontinental title, he left the WWF, and then I think they brought the Road Dogg back, or the Roadie, or whatever. He eventually became the Road Dogg, but anyway, yeah, 1995 was a really slow year for the WWF, and I really feel bad for Bret Hart, because he was clearly the best guy that they had in the company, and he just didn't have anybody to work with, unfortunately. So anyway, yeah, that's my 1995 WWF rant. If you're new here, go ahead and like and subscribe and share. And I will see you next time.